Hi guys, a broken prophet here. I'm going to be doing something that realistically I should have done a long time ago. But with 180 being, I know, in a little resurgence at the moment in popularity, I figured this was a really good time to drop a tutorial on how to do the 180 Chao method, which varies a bit from the method we use in the Chao percent. And I've seen a lot of people, or a few people, struggling to get what I would call optimal times in the Chao evolution recently. And it's quite a slept on area of the game, but it's very, very easy to watch your time just disappear if you're not rehearsed in what you're supposed to be doing and the ways to go about it. So I'm going to make this reasonably quick tutorial going over basically the beginning of what you'd want when you're entering the Chao world and before it, and then moving on to some of the maybe more advanced things you want to do in the garden to really optimize your time and start pushing for consistent sub-hour Chao evolutions, which I think at the top level you should be aiming for around about 58 minutes, luck depending. If you're really lucky, maybe pushing for 57s, which is what I ideally would want to go for in runs. But on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little write-up there. Basically, that's the route you want to be taking. So we use the condor, the skeleton dog, and the half-fish are the three animals we use. 129 condors, 270 skeleton dogs, and 162 half-fish. Obviously using the infinite animal glitch, which saves about 2.5 hours in your evolution. Trust me, I've done it. It's painful. The fruit grows every 7 minutes in the garden, so that's roughly when you'll be using your feed cycles. I recommend about 7 minutes 15, just so there's no potential overlap in fruit not being grown. I've also found this gives a slight bit more consistency of the speed they eat. That might be wearing my tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory, and the Chao garden stuff, but I found it works out better in general for me. And this tutorial will also go over the new shopping method of buying fruit partway through the garden, which wasn't previously done about a year or so ago. Myself and Traitor sort of pioneered it in the ideas, and he's the one that discovered that this method we're going to be doing today is the faster one, and allows us to go from times of about 101 to about 57 on optimal Chao. So first off, we're going to go with the animals you want. I'll go over the best places I think to get them. So make sure you do this if you're using the ESG method where you get the emblem skips. I recommend 100% don't get animals before it, because you will lose them when you reset the game. So only do this after you've reset the game, and either start with Hidden Base or Green Forest Mission 5 to get your emblems, because these are the two best levels I found to get half-fish. The half-fish in Hidden Base Mission 5, there are two of them. So around about 45 seconds in the stage, depending on your movement, you will come to this area where you see the two enemies floating in front of you in the spring. There's a half-fish hidden behind the boxes here. I recommend picking this one up. And there is also another one hiding up there on the spring. If you're going Green Forest, I recommend grabbing both of them. This is also the method I would recommend for you if you're not extremely confident with your animal glitching. It's safer to have the two animals, and with how close they are in proximity, you're really not losing much time. If you are really confident and you like to, I don't know, maybe flex your animal glitching ability, I use Hidden Base Mission 5 to get my emblems, and this is where I will grab my second half-fish. This also allows me to get the Chao key right at the end with Tails, who is my preference in the garden, although you can use any of the three characters in Hero Story. I will 100% recommend Tails, though, for ease. He is because of his low center of gravity, he moves around faster and animal glitches from a slightly easier range, in my opinion, although I have seen people use Sonic very effectively, and Knuckles. So you can grab either Chao key. If you're not doing the pole hop, this is where I grab the Chao key. On subsequent VR, there is one just after where you would get the Mystic Melody upgrade, down at the bottom if you want that method. But obviously you can grab a Chao key anywhere else in the run if you want. Eternal Engine's quite a popular one because the Chao key is in your way. I save it just to the end when I get the animals, for no other reason than I like to. There's not really saving much time anywhere. But yeah, the Chao key would be just down there on the other side of those boxes, or that's where the Mystic Melody is, and the other side of the Mystic Melody would be where the Chao key is, which you'll see, hopefully if I fly over it, down the bottom there. And then the half-fish, there is only one of them in this stage, which is why this route is a lot riskier if you're not comfortable with animal glitching. And you would get it in a moment. So you land on top of this box here. The fastest way I find to get it is to pause hover up, so you clip it up there, and the half-fish is just hiding down here. Grab this guy, finish the stage, it will walk you to the Chao world using the Chao key, and that's your half-fish collected. Now there are two places commonly used for grabbing the condors. Eternal Engine, again, is one that most people use. It's the faster one to grab, considering it is literally right here. If you're grabbing 2 condors, I recommend using this stage because of how fast it is. If you're only grabbing 1, because of menuing and how close it is, I still use Aquatic Mine, which was the old method. And that one is just at the top where the level 3 switch is. It's just chilling out here on this flame here. And then definitively we use Pumpkin Hill to grab the skeleton dog. There are 2 technically in the stage if you get lucky. There's an RNG animal. I recommend just grabbing the safe one. Don't even bother checking the other one. It's not worth the time. It'll take you about 8 seconds to grab this one. Again, if you don't feel confident, grab 2 of them. If you're very, very confident or arrogant in my case, grab 1 and you'll be fine. So they are the animals you want to be using. And then from there, when you enter the Chao world, ensure you have used Sonic as your first character into the Chao world. Regardless if you're going to use him in the run to actually evolution or not, make sure he's the first character that enters the Chao world on your fresh Chao save data. This will give you the best available stats currently that we know from the characters. It gives you an A ranking run, which is the most important stat for the races, obviously. It saves a lot more time than having, say, a B rank if you use Shadow or Rouge. You then get the B in power, which is very good for the karate, because it's very, very easy to lose some of the karate fights, especially if you're low on power and speed. And then swim and fly tend to be fairly irrelevant. They are fly for C and swim is D, and then stamina, which is completely irrelevant for our run, is an E rank. So it just gives us the best balance of stats for getting through all the races in karate fast and as consistently as possible. Once you've done all that, enter the Chao world with your desired character. You'll see there are 2 eggs. So if you enter the world with Sonic first, which I haven't done here, but for the purpose of the demonstration, imagine we have, the Chao that is slightly further away is your better Chao. I think he'd usually be up on the rocks over here, chilling out. That would be your race Chao, the one with the good set stats. And then your other Chao, which you'd be evolving, would be the one sat here near the entranceway. When you enter the world with Sonic, just break this egg and leave. So that when you come back later, you know exactly which Chao is which. You don't get confused, because you do not want to be leveling up the wrong Chao, finding out 10 minutes into the run you've got like a C rank run. It is possible to win the races in karate, but you're really putting your hands in RNGs, and that is not what you want. It's very, very easy to lose races and fights when you don't have good stats. So this is the situation you'd find yourself in after entering the Chao world for the second time with your desired character, whether it's Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or even if you decided to use one of the dark characters, which I do not recommend because their animals are not nearly as good. I definitely recommend using either Sonic or Tails for this, purely because of how fast it is to get their Chao key and how easy they are to use in the garden. So you find yourself in this situation, you've got your animals in the garden, but you still need to go get a Chao. Because you need 2 Chao to evolve, one that evolves into Hero, one that evolves into Dark, and then your Chao that you use for the races. The Chao that you use for the races cannot evolve Hero or Dark, because then it won't be able to race in the subsequent Hero or Dark races. So it needs to be either a neutral evolution, which is slow, don't evolve it, or a child still. You come to the black market, you buy an egg. Fortunately, there is one here. There is a minor chance when you're doing a run that you can get. There's always an egg in the garden when you in the shop when you first enter, but that does not mean you have an affordable egg. You will have in the region of 9,000 to 10,000 rings by the time you get to this stage. You have unlocked rings that cost more. I actually got, it's about 0.3% chance, and I had it happen in 2 consecutive runs where I had a shiny lime green egg, which I think is 15,000 rings, and that was the only one purchasable. It cost me 2 runs in a row. I'm extremely unlucky, but it does happen, so be aware. There isn't a lot you can do to save it. You just sort of have to keep coming back to the shop every few minutes and hoping that it's cycled through to the next one. And then you can buy your egg and hopefully salvage your run. But with this, you'd also buy 4 fruit because that's the maximum slots you have. And fruit are very, very important for this run. So a Chao's evolution speed is affected by 2 things as a child. It's affected by time in the garden and the amount of fruit eaten, which we can usually measure by stamina, which is why I recommend, if possible, to avoid getting Chao fruit. If you want to keep good track of it and knowing when they're evolving, get hero, get dark. You can take, say, round or square, or triangle, but they are very risky because a lot of the time your Chao will not like them. And if your Chao does not like them, they will not eat them, and you'll just be watching time fade away where you've got useless fruit sat in your garden. So aim for hero or dark at the start. It doesn't matter which way around you go. It's so early into the evolution, it will not affect their alignment. Just start feeding them. So you take your bad Chao that's not going to be racing, get him eating, hatch your egg, and same for them too. Get them eating as soon as possible and get them close together. If your Chao are separated in a wide stance across the garden, you're going to find yourself trying to run back and forth managing them, and this will not be fun. They'll be throwing fruit, you'll be trying to salvage it, the other one will throw fruit, you're just losing time, dripping and dripping away, and there's not a lot you can do when they're in that range apart. So you want them as close together as possible without overlapping, so they're not in an awkward position. So something like this would be pretty good, where they're both sat close together, eating. Now when you first enter the world, there's always 5 fruit available on the trees. Depending on which character you've entered the world with, depends where these fruit will be, but you'll always have 4 that will ready to fall off and 1 that is about 30 seconds or so from falling off. So give them the hero fruit, start knocking fruit off the trees, and then start feeding them. You'll quite often find that one Chao has wandered off early on while you're still setting up the trees. Just grab them, corral them back together, start feeding again, and then knock off the other fruit. So I recommend not knocking them all off at the same time, because again, they will be wandering around and not eating. Time not eating and time not animal glitching is time lost. And you really don't want to be losing time. So get them in this situation where they're eating sat together and start bringing the big fruit to them. You want to get rid of the big fruit early. There's no point having it sat around, because at the end of the day, that's the one that takes the longest amount of time to eat. And if you're waiting for them to eat, say, 1 bite of 1 fruit and then you've got 2 large ones, you can't be leaving to go animal glitch until you're confident all the fruit is gone, because this will affect how the fruit grows on the trees. So grab all your big fruit, bring it over to your Chao, and then start feeding them the big ones and just working down in size order. So give them the big ones, and then as you slowly get smaller ones, start feeding them, say, the next biggest ones, until you're down to your last bits of fruit. Say we've gone through this, it will usually take about 3 minutes or so to feed your Chao. Around the area, it can range. I've had ones that have been close to 2 minutes, which the faster it is, obviously, the better. It gives you more time to animal glitch in between tree growing cycles. You can get really unlucky and it be up to 4.5, 5 minutes. Sometimes there is not a lot you can do about it, unfortunately. Sometimes they will just not want to eat and they'll be throwing their fruit away, and you're sad because you can't really fix it. You just do your best, get them close together, feeding them the big ones, and then working your way down and just getting food into them as fast as possible, minimalising the amount of time they're not eating. So imagine now that they've eaten all the fruit. I've given them... I recommend going once they have 2 small bites left. So if they're on their final bite of fruit, don't wait for them to finish it. It's not worth it. You'll be sat around stood for 10 seconds when you could be setting up something more important like the animal glitch. So let's just imagine they've eaten. You've got your... This will be your race Chao. And now you want them somewhere over on these rocks to animal glitch. This is because they're out of the way. The other Chao can't climb up these rocks. So there is no way they're going to interfere with what you're trying to do with the animal glitching. And trying to animal glitch when you've got other Chao wandering around, or say animals wandering around, it gets awkward because your character will try and pick up either the other Chao or the other animal. It runs a high risk of losing your animal and just ruining your run in general. And that's really not what you want to do. So I recommend throwing the Chao, as horrible as that sounds. An unhappy Chao will sit there and they will cry. Which again might sound a bit sadistic, but they're not moving. And that's the important thing, is they're sat or just stood still. And And while they're stood still, you can leave, grab your animal, and they're not going to be running around, and you're not going to have to corral them back up again. So I always start with the condor. Condor is the only one of the 3 animals that has a negative stat, which is run. It will decrease your run stat. Levels cannot go down. So it's not too much of a worry if you end up having to do a condor later on because you've messed up somewhere. The actual level value will not go down, just the sort of experience in between levels. And that there's only 10 points in those, so it's not a major issue if you do. But obviously, you want to be doing as minimal animal glitching through the run as possible. So having those stats coming down is bad. So if you've never seen the animal glitch before, it's a pretty simple in concept. Tails needs to be so far away from the Chao that the Chao will not take the animal off of you. If he takes the animal, it is lost, it's dead, you can't use it again. But you don't want to be so far away that when you put it down, like there is no response from the Chao. So you need to find your happy range. Depending on which character depends on how far away it is. I recommend Tails because he's the closest to the ground, so he actually physically puts the Chao down fastest. I find this is easier for rhythm. If you're more comfortable with Sonic, say you've been doing that casually for a few years, because this is quite a common casual known trick, then stick with what you know. It's no slower to use another character in the garden. In fact, I believe that Sonic technically would be faster because he moves around naturally faster, being a faster character. And the only animal glitch that is technically slower is the first one, and it's barely significant. But if you're new to this or don't feel confident, Tails is the way to go. He is the easiest character to use for this. So when the Chao turns to you like that, you know you were close enough. And then it's a simple matter of maintaining that distance and just a rhythm. So you don't want to go too fast. If you go too fast, nothing will happen like that. And if you go too slowly, which I'm not going to actually demonstrate, but if you wait too long, the Chao has time to think and it can move. A moving Chao in an animal glitch is very, very dangerous because he can just take a step towards you, take your animal, and you've lost it. Now, if you only have, for instance, one animal like I would have, this can cost you potentially, if it's the half-fish, up to 1.5 minutes to grab another one. That is a massive, massive time loss in Chao. Where a condor or a skeleton dog, maybe not so much, but if you do lose one of those animals, it then leaves you with the dilemma of have to reroute what you're doing. Because if you leave the Chao world and enter a level, you will lose the animals currently in your garden. So if you have a half-fish and you haven't used it and you leave because you've lost a condor, you will then lose that half-fish. So that's still that major time loss. And I've had to reroute before. Unfortunately, I have a spreadsheet usually up with the values in that I can type in to work it out as I'm going. But ideally, you do not want to be doing this. It's not a situation you want to find yourself in, especially if this is something you're not extremely comfortable with. So for the animals, you just keep going. So this whole Chao world works on a cycle. As I said before, it's about 7 minutes for the fruit to grow. There are also time cycles in Chao evolution. There's about 3 minutes and 18 seconds. You don't really need to know this value. Just know that it exists, mainly for just the knowledge basis. Like if you're waiting for a Chao to evolve, the time only ticks by every 3 minutes and 18 seconds. So if you think you've got to the point where this Chao should be evolving now, but it was not, some point in the next 3 minutes, 18 seconds, it will tick over to the next time value and they will evolve if they're in that range. It's probably a good time to actually talk about the evolution itself. So the way a Chao evolves as a child, I've said before, is time and food based. So you'll notice the experience bars on the stats there as I've got it paused. The way this works with Chao is, as a child, it takes 200 minutes for them to go from a child to the evolution process. Exactly 200 minutes. Which, an hour and 40, you're wondering, 57-minute evolution, how is that possible then? Well, for every single bite of fruit they take, so every time that experience bar goes up with a normal fruit, that is 1 minute of time you're saving. So if it has 5 bites of fruit, it's now 115 minutes. No, 195 minutes, good maths, to evolve. So that's why you want to be feeding as regularly as possible to minimize that time as much as possible. So I recommend every 7 minutes and 15 seconds, as I said earlier, just to guarantee there's no potential overlap on the fruit growing, so you don't run to a tree and find out there is nothing there, or it will be there, but it's not fully grown. because that's just time stood around doing nothing, which is, again, time loss, bad. So for those of you who don't feel comfortable managing the time in the Chao garden, like you've got too much going on, you can't pay attention to it, you can make, what other people have done is make splits for it. So you have a tree 1, tree 2, tree 3, for example, or feed 1, just so you know how long your segment is. So I personally have a shopping split, so I know exactly once I enter the Chao world, I split for entering the actual Chao world itself after shopping. And then I can see then on the segment, every 7 minutes and 15 seconds, it's the next stage, the next time to feed. And that for me, it starts as soon as I enter the Chao world. So regardless of the situation when I enter, 7 minutes and 15 seconds later, I want to be leaving the animal glitch and knocking the fruit off the next tree, which will have grown in that time. And then you continue this, going between feeding, getting rid of all your fruit, and then back to the animal glitch for your next cycle. So at 7:15, I'll do the first one, then 14:30, 21:45, 29 minutes, so on and so forth. Usually around the 36 to 37 mark, you'll be coming off to go do your 5th feed. And this is where it says shop after the skeleton dog. This is when I want to be finishing with my skeleton dog. If the time overlaps slightly, so say I've gone a little slowly with the animal glitch or I've had some slow feeds, I will still continue that animal glitch up until the end of that level. So as soon as it hits 99 fly, that's when I consider that cycle done. If I've lost a minute to it, I've lost a minute to it. Because at this point, the cycles become a little less relevant because you're going shopping. So I'd finish with the skeleton dog. I'd ignore everything else in the garden and I'd leave and go shopping. Now what you're looking for when you go shopping is 10 fruit. So there's 2 trips. And ideally, you want dark fruit. This is because by using a hero character, as you're feeding your Chao, they will naturally be turning towards the hero alignment. So here I would have got lucky, and there's the dark fruit. So you'd want to do 2 trips, and you'd buy 5 each, so you'd have 10 dark fruit in the garden. You would then be feeding these fruit, along with the 9 that have grown in the garden, so all 19 fruit, in one sitting to your 2 Chao. I recommend, 100% recommend, because otherwise you could find yourselves in problems with the alignment, is that when it comes to dark fruit or hero fruit, for example, the only actual bite that's relevant in terms of their changing from hero to dark or other way around is the final bite of the fruit. So when it's that little tiny bit at the end, that's the only bit that affects alignment. So try and give that to the same Chao every time. If you have to take it off the other Chao because it's about to finish it, take it off the other Chao and give it to the one you're trying to turn. Otherwise, you can find yourself done your dark fruit stage where you're shopping and you've got 2 very neutral looking Chao. Which means if you don't fix that, you're going to be getting 2 neutral Chao. You will not unlock the hero and dark gardens. You will not unlock the hero and dark races in the Chao stadium. And therefore you were 2 emblems short. You've just cost yourself about half an hour of time. It's bad. So you need to be making sure you're paying attention to their alignment. You can quickly tell with a Chao what their alignment is. If you're using these ones in the garden, you'll see very quickly that when they, if I can get it to trigger a heart here, when it gets a heart with a hero character, that is its alignment changing towards hero. These Chao will turn white when they are hero, and subsequently you'll see very quickly, with a bit of abuse, these Chao will also turn like a dark brown colour. Yeah, it takes about, we've actually science this, it takes about 21 throws, but it's a lot faster for hitting them. And you'll see the Chao start to turn darker. Now normally your Chao wouldn't have obviously the condor wings here, and you'd be able to tell pretty quickly from the wings whether it's turned hero or dark. The hero wings look a lot more angely, the dark ones look a lot more sort of spiky and devilly. But this would now be a very good dark Chao. You can tell by the crest on it as well. It has all the attributes of a dark Chao. And that's what you want to see. Now there are multiple ways we do this. Obviously the dark fruit being the fastest one because you're feeding them anyway. So their alignment would be changing with that. Then maybe not all the way done sometimes with the fruit. If your Chao are very close in their evolution together, so your hero and dark Chao are very close in level, I recommend when you're running to go do your next animal glitch, just hit him a couple of times. As bad as that sounds, throw him against the wall, spin him with your tail a couple of times. You'll see his alignment change very quickly with the hits. And then you can be fairly confident in the knowledge you now have a Dark Chao and a Hero Chao. If there is a disparity in level, so say you've got one that's gotten to level 13 and one that's level 11. This is obviously bad because now one is 20 minutes or so further ahead in the evolution process. What I recommend doing in this situation is kind of situational. If you've hit your Chao, don't use this method. This method relies on your Chao being happy and having max happiness, or at least very, very close to max happiness. And what you can do here, this is a recently found one actually, I accidentally did it in a run and saw how quick it could be. So your higher level Chao is the one you want to turn dark, because if you have to take time to change it, to make it darker, obviously that's time it won't be eating if you've run out of dark fruit. So you want to give the other one a chance to catch up in that period. So I recommend every time you have one that's slightly higher, try and make that one your Dark Chao. Just so that, if you do need to fix it, you are not losing time fixing it. The other one's catching up, you're balancing it back out again, and just finishing off the alignment. But if you've got them, you treated them well, you've not had to throw them around, you've not had to beat them, and they're happy, the method I would recommend using, it's a bit finicky. It's only faster if done optimally. So if you haven't practiced it, I don't recommend using it. But what you do is you give the Chao fruit like this, and then it's pick up and take it. Just like that. Very quick. Pick up and take the fruit. If you get too close, you'll pet them. That's bad. You want to get that range nice, just like that. If you find and you can if you get it right, just sit here and do that. Now this Chao, because its happiness isn't maxed, it's still gaining happiness when I'm doing this. But you see how quickly this is now changing to a Dark Chao. Like that now is a Dark Chao. Ready to, or at least on the edge of evolving into a Dark Chao. That is the fastest way you can change a Chao's alignment. Because there's no running around chasing it. There's no messing with it. It's just taking the fruit, which changes it towards a dark because you're mistreating it with a hero character. Subsequently, if your Chao is not turning hero enough, a lot of people tell you speed petting or something like that. The best way to do it, if you have the chance, is animal glitch. Animal glitching a Chao is comfortably, in my opinion, the fastest way to turn it towards a hero. So if you're close to a hero but not quite confident, animal glitch it maybe 5 or 6 times. You'll see its alignment change and you'll be set. The other method for turning dark, if you don't feel confident using the fruit method I've just shown, is to pick up and throw. You can either just simply play like squash with your Chao, just bouncing off the wall and back. That is the slower way to do it, because it takes about 22 hits to turn it from near hero to dark. And the fastest way, abuse-wise, would be to just use the attack button. But there is a cooldown. So you see there that it didn't hit him. There's a cooldown on this. So you sort of trigger it between throwing and hitting. Bouncing off the wall into the spin. Pick him up, off the wall, into the spin. That's the fastest way, abuse-wise, to turn a Chao dark with a hero character. Again, this will take a bit of practice. These are not something that, if you're not great at moving around the Chao garden, which is very different naturally to the actual game itself, you'll find yourself throwing it off at an angle, chasing around. And this isn't what you want to be doing, obviously. You just want to be as straight and off the wall into hit, if that's the method you're going with. I do recommend not using abuse anymore. One, because the viewers don't like it, and two, because it is slower. It's more consistent. You're less likely to mess up the abuse and to, say, underdo it, but it is slower than using dark fruit, and it's definitely slower than the pick up and dropping the fruit. And that is the way I'd recommend going. So yeah, I think we've covered what I would call all the basics. So this is everything you want to be doing. So I'm going to go into a few things that I'd say are a little more advanced now that you want to be looking for. So after the animal glitching, I always recommend going to the same tree. It doesn't matter which tree you go to. This is the closest one, so it's the one I use. But I recommend always picking the same tree because you're most likely to have that tree with the grown fruit. Because say it takes you 10 seconds to knock the fruit off this tree, you then give them to the Chao, you do the next tree. You then give them to the Chao, you go to the next tree. That could be a potential 30, 45 seconds between when you're knocking the first fruit off that tree to you're knocking the last fruit off that tree. So if you go one round where you do this one like first, and then the next time you come and do this one first, that's a good 45 seconds that it might not have grown. And you're running the risk of trying to knock off a fruit that isn't fully grown. So just for your own comfort and guarantee, always start on the same first tree. Again, I recommend this one just because it is the closest, but it's not that relevant in terms you're losing maybe a couple of seconds at most through the run going to another tree. It doesn't matter which one, just be going the same tree. I mentioned it before at the start. When you're doing the fruit, don't knock off all of them at once, because you're wasting time when the Chao are not eating. So you knock off the first tree, give them the fruit, make sure they're both eating, knock off the next tree. You can decide here what you prefer. You can either knock off the fruit from the second tree and then go straight to the third tree. I recommend, however, once you've knocked off the second tree, check if your Chao are eating. If they have stopped eating or are very close to finishing their fruit, give them the fruit from the second tree before knocking off the third. It's a minor optimization, but what it does is it keeps them closer together. It gives them less chance of doing this and just wandering off. And also, obviously, it's not wasting the time by having them not performing a positive action for your evolution in the garden. And at the end of the day, you want to be spending as much time as possible with one of these positive actions, speeding up your evolution process. So that's Chao management stuff. I've mentioned about like I said earlier about hitting a Chao if you want to keep it still. You can also a lot of the time pet it. I'll go into this little happy animation where it gives you a few seconds to keep them still. This is mainly useful when animal glitching. So for instance, if you've messed up one of your attempts at animal glitching, where it's a bit further away for you than you anticipated, you miss it, like that for instance, as you can see, he very quickly starts to move. So in this situation, you can just pet him, and then you can turn around and start your animal glitching again. It's just a way of making sure that you have that extra couple of seconds so you don't mess up and lose your animal. Because at the end of the day, that is the worst thing that can happen, really. Like in a single moment, is to lose an animal. I will go on now to something a little more advanced. Or beginner, depending on how you want to do it. So this is a method, personally, I don't use. It's called what I would call the reset upless animal glitch. So you saw before when I was doing it, every time I decided to give an animal, I then had to turn around to reset my position to give it another animal. Because of the time you have to wait, so you'll notice, I'll do it here as a quick demonstration of why you need to wait. So if you watch the stats here, you give the animal, if you take it away like that instantly, it's getting nothing from the animal. So you need to wait for this animation to play out anyway and the stats to trigger. So if you're quick at just turning around and giving the animal, you can do it, in theory, frame perfectly, but it's not worth even trying. But this is obviously, it does have movement that you can mess up. So there are methods that you can remove that. They are naturally not faster because obviously you can go frame perfectly the other way, but they are consistent and they allow you to play with less thought. And it removes risk sometimes. If you're good at setting it up, it removes risks. So the way this works is, you've got, say, a position up here along a wall. And I may not give myself enough time here. When you've got the Chao along the wall, if you position yourself correctly, what you can do is, if you slide the animal down the wall to the Chao, you can keep all the components in the same place. So for instance here, because the animal, when you give it to them, would usually bounce off, by sliding it down the wall, you're not giving it the opportunity to disappear from you. So this turns the whole set up and moving around bit and takes that all away and just turns this into a rhythm game, effectively. And it's just finding that rhythm where you can just mindlessly just not do anything and just press the B button. And that's all you have to do. And that, if you're not confident at doing the animal glitch, I recommend learning either this method up here, which I find is the easiest one to set up, or you can do it down here in this corner as well. This is the method I would go for because you can set it up almost unintentionally. And it works the exact same way. You're just pushing the Chao, or the animal down the wall to the Chao, and there's no reposition setup needed. I personally find this method better because, as I said, I don't use this method inherently. Like, I don't target to use this method. But what you can do, if you get a good throw, when you're throwing your Chao over there, you can, that was a bad attempt, but you can drop it right into this corner with your throw. And that leaves you in a position then where you can set up this without intentionally setting it up. So you're not losing any time in the setup, which is the only real drawback to using this method. It is a very consistent method, especially for people that aren't comfortable with the Chao Garden as much as, say, somebody that's done it the hundreds of times I have. It just leaves you in a position where you're less likely to make a mistake. And you can't turn your brain off because obviously you can go too fast or too slow and still mess it up. But it takes a lot of the thought away from what you are doing. I think... I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really needs to be covered in the garden. I think I've gone over basically everything about it. The only other, minor optimization I'd say is once you've done all your cycles, you've done the big feed where you've given them the shopping fruit, so the 10 fruit you buy from the shop and the 9 from the trees that fall them. Rather than continue with the cycles, what I recommend to do in this situation is just start with the half fish and keep going. So ignore the 7 minutes 15 after that cycle, it becomes irrelevant. And you want to get to about 15 or so, 10 to 15 half fish away from completion. So the last stat you would finish when doing the animal glitching would be swimming. All the other stats will max out, and swimming will be a little bit behind just because of the route we use. So you have the option at this point to either just finish with the half fish and then just focus on the evolution, or what I recommend doing is stopping 10-15 short. So this would be in the region of about 94.4 to 96-ish swim. You stop there and then go and finish off the evolution of your Chao. And then while it's in that evolution stage, when the shell comes around it, the old jingles play, use that little time there when otherwise you'd be doing nothing, and just use that to do your last 10 to 15 half fish, just to try and minimize the amount of time you spent doing nothing. I think that is pretty much everything I think needs to be covered. I can't think of another thing off the top of my head that seriously needs to be focused on during the garden. It's just, a lot of it is common sense. You just want to be minimalizing your time doing nothing. Just keeping everything close together, keeping activities going on continuously. So continuously feeding, just continuously animal glitching back and forth, and just following the cycles. Again, if you don't feel comfortable with it, I recommend using, say, splits for the trees, just so you can keep track of your time in the garden. Using potentially one of the reset up list methods, just in case you don't feel comfortable with the resetting up position, because it can be quite easy to make a mistake when it sounds simple. You're flicking your analog stick to the left and then to the right, but sometimes with the nature of analog sticks, you might drift, you might have flick back, you might just hit the slightly diagonal angle, and that messes it up. So just it's doing whatever feels comfortable. Like, you don't want to stress yourself out in the garden. I see a lot of people they make maybe a couple of mistakes, they start to panic, and it's very easy because this is a very stressful part of the run. It might not always look it from the outside, or like, for instance, if you ever watch me doing it, I might see him relaxed and just having a great time. But it is quite a stressful time, especially if you're not extremely comfortable in it. So work out from everything I've shown today, look at what you think would be the most comfortable for you, and I recommend that as being the best strat. If then you start to feel more confident a bit down the line, you can start trying to add in a little bit more risk. Maybe then start moving to one animal, or start moving away from taking the 10-15 seconds at the reset up list. But mainly focus on the feed cycles. It's very simple to just be like, oh, I'll just give it another couple of extra levels on this, and then suddenly you're taking 8 minutes between trees, your cycles will start to get a bit messed up, and that's really not what you want to happen. making sure you clear out the fruit. It's okay if there's one little bite left, but if you can, get rid of all the fruit. Because if you do start leaving little bits of fruit around, it will or can have an effect on the growth of the next cycle of fruit, especially if it's one of the first 3 fruit you knocked off the trees. This is something very easy to overlook and not pay attention to, so I don't expect people to be going, which one did I knock off first and all that, because they tend to be the first one you feed anyway. But if you are leaving, for instance, the second fruit you knock off and it's got 3 bites left, there is a very high chance it's going to mess up your fruit cycles progressing throughout the run. So do what you can to get rid of those as fast as possible, or just make sure you get rid of all the fruit. If you get rid of all the fruit, none of those problems will happen. One other thing that I will mention is that animals can disappear in the Chao world. It's not always consistent. It usually won't happen, but you increase your risk if, for instance, this half-fish here, I've used that one, and where's the other one? I don't know if the other one's the one I've used. I can't see it. Oh, it's there. So when you actually, although the animal's still in a situation where technically it's not been consumed, it still exists, they've both been used, and this can often set them in a little, like a flagged state of used. It didn't happen in this instance, but when you use them like that and then leave, there is the chance the garden will say, you've used this animal, and just get rid of it. It might have happened with the other one. I can only see that one. Oh no, they're both there. This has happened to people in runs. As I said, it's not always consistent like that, but there is a chance if you use an animal as part of the animal glitch and leave, that you will lose it. Which is why I recommend doing the shop straight after the skeleton dog before you've used that half-fish, just to minimise that risk completely as you can of losing the half-fish. Especially with it being the half-fish, the worst possible animal to lose because it's so slow to grab again. But other than that, I'd say just try and have fun with it. It is stressful, it can be hard. You can sometimes be watching time slip away and you having no impact on it. It sucks. I've had it happen to me. I aim for, as I said, 58s, high 57s, and I still sometimes get a 102 evolution just because I make a mistake that I'm not expecting or things don't play out, and that is the nature of this part of speedrunning. It's hard. It's a very technical part of the game that a lot of people overlook because it's so different to the rest of the gameplay. But yeah, just make it as easy as you can for yourself. Try not to overthink it if you don't want to. I spend a lot of my time doing numbers, paying attention to the stats and timings. If you don't want to do that, don't do that. You do not want to overload yourself with information when you're doing this if you're not comfortable with it. So just simplify it for yourself as much as you can. And if you have any comments, questions or anything for this, feel free to either find me on Twitch at A Broken Prophet, or just comment and I will get back to you whenever I can with answers. I spend a lot of time doing stuff in the Chao Garden. I am reasonably knowledgeable, or I might happen to know people that do know the answers. But yeah, for any of you that have stuck around this long, thank you very much for watching, and I hope this has been useful for you. And good luck on any runs you attempt to do. Ciao.